Hey everyone, welcome back. Chris here, and today we're going to tackle the silent killers in data engineering. In medicine, a silent killer is something like high blood pressure or carbon monoxide poisoning, problems that quietly do damage, sometimes for years, with zero symptoms. By the time you even notice, it is almost too late. Data engineering has its own silent killers. No obvious alarms, but quietly destroying your team's reputation and data integrity. They weaken your pipelines and threaten your projects. Today, I'm going to show you three of the classic medical silent killers and their data engineering equivalents. Most importantly, I'm going to show you how to spot them early before disaster strikes. Let's jump into some of those. And as we go along, stop me if you have any questions. Let me know down in the chat. Say hello if you're here. And I am super excited to talk to you about these silent killers. All right. So, first off, high blood pressure is one of the biggest silent killers of people. And it's called the silent killer for a reason. Most people feel fine, but under the surface, their heart and organs are under this constant stress. No symptoms until the crisis hits. Technical debt in data engineering works almost exactly the same way. It builds up quietly, quick fixes, shortcuts, legacy code that you meant to clean up. Everything looks fine, but then your pipeline faces some real stress. Things start to scale and suddenly everything starts collapsing. Let me tell you a quick story. I inherited this pipeline that just worked. Everybody was like, I inherited it from somebody that inherited it, and it just worked. And until month end, all of a sudden, after I grabbed it and was responsible for it, it just melted down under that load. It turns out that years of just patched over spaghetti code and temporary fixes finally caught up with us. The business lost nearly a whole week of reporting, and marketing was just under duress about it. All because nobody wanted to do those regular checkups and didn't have time for the technical debt that was building up because of it. So here are some symptoms. These are things that look just fine and healthy day to day. Gradual creeping slowdowns, right? All of a sudden, your ETL processes start to take 10, 20, 30, 60 minutes longer than they were taking. Sudden catastrophic failure at the worst, absolute worst possible moment, usually during some type of month or quarter close that really starts to wreak havoc on the business. Some ways that you could prevent this, you could schedule some regular health checks, code reviews, pipeline audits, documentation sprints that help to pay down that technical debt before it becomes so incredibly urgent. In addition, make sure that technical wellness is not a routine and is a routine and not a reaction. So this should be something that you are doing on a consistent basis, that you have it scheduled as part of your your work plan, as part of your roadmap for the year, and it shouldn't be done all of a sudden because something broke. So hello again to everybody that's out there. Let me know down in the chat that you're here. Say hello. I'd love to hear from you. Okay. So second, silent killer of people is carbon monoxide poisoning. It's, invisible, and I'm going to relate this to kind of invisible data drift, right? So carbon monoxide is the invisible killer because it's odorless and colorless and tasteless. You don't even realize that it's there until you're already in danger. Data drift is very similar. It's the carbon monoxide of data engineering. Columns start to change, data types start to shift, someone tweaks an upstream source, and sometimes there's no errors. A lot of times there's no errors, but your pipeline keeps quietly sending bad data to your dashboards. Columns get misaligned. All of a sudden, you have stuff that's in counts that are in canceled columns that should be in added columns, and it just wrecks all kinds of havoc amongst your data ecosystem. You know, I've seen this 2 million project, that new $2 million project nearly fail because for 3 months, a source column quietly changed format and nobody knew. There was no data contract in place. There was no alert. There was nothing that fired to let us know that something was wrong. And then all of a sudden, this quarterly review came up and the client found some major reporting gaps in their data. There were no alarms. Metrics started just slowly looking off. And, day to day, it was hard to tell. But when you only look at it month to month, those big changes start to become obvious. Teams were patching dashboards manually instead of fixing, teams that patch, that dashboards manually instead of fixing the actual root data cause, right? And I'm not talking about your ETL. I'm talking about fix the root, right? Fix the source. Go all the way to the source, identify what the issue is. If it is a change at that point that needs to be integrated into your ETL, then do that. But make sure it wasn't an error up front. Some prevention steps that you could take here: install carbon dioxide detectors, right? Automated schema validation in your pipelines are so incredibly important. I have a video about that, be sure you check that out. But data quality checks, anomaly detection, these are things that we've talked about in other videos. Make sure that you're implementing that in your data pipelines. Alert on those silent changes, right? Not just the failures. Make sure that when you're building in those drift detectors and your data quality detectors and your record detectors, right? Make sure that you are sending alerts when those things start to trigger to let the team know, hey, something's changed, something's off, something's wrong. Don't assume that no news is good news. Green does not always mean good. um I've got this image here. Green does not always mean good. um and don't, just because the pipelines are green, don't just blindly trust that, especially if you don't have these alerts built into your pipelines. So what is the biggest invisible data problem that you've seen in your work? Let me know down in the chat, and I'll highlight some of the best stories if they come up. But yeah, would love to hear kind of what are the invisible data problems that you've seen come across your desk. So, you know, here's a big one here, and this probably might be a trigger for some people, but ovarian and prostate cancer, you know, these cancers are infamous for subtlety. Like ovarian prostate cancer, they often are there's no symptoms until the disease is so advanced that it's beyond repair. I have some personal family issues with that in the background. So, but in data, hidden organizational dysfunction is really a silent killer, right? No clear ownership, documentation gaps, a culture where nobody is really accountable for when something happens to that data, when something changes, when there's an error occurring. Nobody owns the data or pipeline quality. There's gaps in documentation. There's tribal knowledge that only one or two people know because they've been there for decades, right? What happens when those people retire? God forbid, what happens if they get hit by a bus tomorrow, right? Or maybe they win the lottery and they just decide, okay, I'm done. If you want to have a positive spin on that. But issues often go unsolved because everyone thinks it's somebody else's job. That person with that tribal knowledge is often relied on to know everything that's going on and occurring, and there's no way to expect that for one person. um some steps here to prevent this: assign some clear data owners for every asset. Prioritize your documentation and knowledge sharing. Make sure that you're creating, data flows in like lucid charts to create some, documentation and, get that information out of that tribal knowledge stance and into a documented repo of what's going on in your data ecosystem. Build a culture of transparency and proactive pipeline health. Again, don't wait until something breaks before you take the time to do the maintenance that needs to occur. Um, so, just like your health, the biggest threats in data engineering are often the ones that are invisible and that you don't see until it's almost too late. That's why it's so important to not only have your primary care regular checkups, but also have these regular checkups in your data ecosystem with your data teams. Automation is important to build in here. Make sure that especially with like secrets, right? And we talked about last week, we talked about secrets and the importance of security, automated key rotation. Make sure that you have triggers and alerts set up to let you know, hey, this password's going to expire in the next 7 to 10 days. Let's go ahead and make those changes and get those keys and those secrets rotated so that we don't have any gaps in our reporting and in our data pipelines, right? Otherwise, those in particular could be silent killers until all of a sudden they creep up and they completely blow a whole day's worth of work. So we've got several people on now. Tell me, have you ever caught any silent killers in your data stack? Or, we've all learned the hard way at some point. I'd love to hear some stories. Let me know what your favorite prevention hack or tactic is in the chat. Let's, continue this discussion and help each other with our data ecosystems and helping to keep them healthy and our careers healthy. Thank you all for joining today. I know that we've got a handful of people out there. Super excited to see you. So don't wait. Again, I've been harping on this, the whole call, or the whole session, but don't wait for a crisis. Run your checkups. Build these into your project sprints. Build these into your work patterns so that you have these regular checkups. If you have a team, if you're lucky enough to be in a group that's big enough that you have a team of several data engineers, rotate that responsibility so that the whole team's not working on your tech debt all at once, right? Have one person each week, that gets assigned to tech debt for that week. Maybe they're doing documentation. Maybe they were, in Elation doing documenting what fields mean and what tables are for and things like that. Maybe they're actually working on some other tech debt that just maintenance that needs to occur within your data warehouse or lake house. So rotate that. It helps to keep people from getting burned out, gives them a break from some of the bigger projects that they may be working on, and keeps it all from laying on one person's shoulders. Unfortunately, sometimes you are in a situation where you are the only data engineer, you are the only sometimes data person at all, and it does rely on you. Hopefully in those situations you might have the opportunity to contract out for some of that work, especially as the tech debt continues to build up. But especially in those situations where you're the only person, so incredibly important, one, to focus to pay attention to your own mental health, that you're not getting burned out, that you are doing things to take breaks, to step away for yourself, but also so important to build that momentum, that habit in your work stream, that you are working on maybe documentation one day a week, right? And maybe one day a week you're double checking on any maintenance issues that may be sneaking up on you. Like I said, especially like key rotation and credential rotation. Um, Prevention is often so much the best medicine, right? Both personally and in your data, whether it's again for your heart or your pipelines. It is. If this was helpful, be sure to like down below and share it with your friends. But we do these on Thursday or Fridays around this time, about this 11 to 12 o'clock hour. Try to hey everybody, Zaffir's here, networking on my side from Azure to Databricks. Kumar, yeah, Zafir, thank you so much for coming, man. Yeah, networking is a big piece that sneaks in, right? Things change over time. Connection strings sometimes change as data centers get migrated. Um, Again, when we're talking about security and keys, making sure that they get rotated appropriately. When new data sources come on, making sure that you're getting those into Key Vault. Again, as one person, as one data engineer, it's could be incredibly difficult to keep up with all of it, but so important uh, to do that. Awesome. So we could get into some other things. Let's see. For those of you that don't know, uh, on the channel, we kind of have our topic for the week has been monitoring and observability, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about here. A lot of monitoring and observability really is important and addresses these silent killers right in your data careers and in your data ecosystems. It is uh, incredibly important that you don't just, things like the ADF monitoring is just not enough, right? It's not robust enough. It doesn't provide the alerting that you really need to make sure that your data ecosystem is healthy and doesn't have any gaps, right? So important, that you are building in that schema detection and alerting. Um, and be sure to check out those videos. I had one video earlier in the week talking about kind of the vocabulary, right? Just making sure that people were prepared for the bigger lesson that came out today, this morning. So be sure to check out that video this morning, um, that came out about monitoring and observability in your data ecosystems. uh, so we're on lesson 7 of our data engineering 101 series, and we will have a total of 10 lessons. So a few more, almost done wrapping that up. In addition, we have a couple of super exciting guests coming up on our live streams on the first Friday of June. I'm sorry. On June 6th, we are going to have um, Lindsay come, and she works exclusively with nonprofit businesses, doing data for nonprofit businesses. Super excited about Lindsay coming on and talking about her experience and how working with nonprofits differs from working with the more public sector, right? um, Private sector, sorry. And so super excited about having her on. And then in addition, we are going to also have Shane Gibson come on the following week. And those episodes are going to be back to our normal time, just but partly for their schedules, partly, just to, give everybody time to be off of work. But it's going to go back to our 10 p.m. Eastern time, Friday evenings for those two sessions, for Lindsay and Shane. So Shane is a recent book publisher. Super excited about that. So we're gonna have him on again Friday, June 13th, at 10 p.m. Eastern. So super excited about that. So how do you learn from the basics? How Fabric with will be with data engineers in the future? Any idea? You know, Yeah, Fabric is definitely the way that Microsoft is pushing people right now, right? Microsoft uh, discontinued the DP 203 exams and certs, which was our data engineering associate certification, and in favor of the Fabric Data Engineer cert, which is DP 700. There's also the DP 600 if you're interested in the data analytics side of it, but I think that Fabric is going to be the ecosystem that you're going to have to go to, right, and have to learn. They've done a decent job of continuing to build out that Fabric ecosystem for Microsoft, and having everything kind of being all in one resource, having multiple resources kind of all in one. You can do ADF pipelines, you can do you do SQL databases in there now. You can have your uh, obviously Power BI. Well, recently earlier in the year, uh, Microsoft discontinued the Power BI license that many enterprises were using and pushed them into Fabric, right? And so as those licenses get renewed, those companies and enterprises are going to have to move into Fabric. And a lot of times, that's a great opportunity to go ahead and migrate the rest of their data ecosystem. They don't have to. They could continue to use whatever tools they're using, but uh, good opportunity to go ahead and migrate. So, as far as how to learn data engineering, from the basics, there's so many opportunities and so many tools out there. One of which is Code Academy. I really like Code Academy. I've talked about it before on the channel. I'll put a link down in the comments for you all to take a look at. But and it includes I want to say maybe 30% discount. But Code Academy, I like Code Academy for multiple reasons. One, it kind of gamifies some of your learning, so kind of creates some excitement there. But also, it sorry, looking for the link here so I could copy and paste it. But also, a lot of companies use Code Academy for their tech evaluation, right? For their kind of exam that they use to evaluate your technical skills. So, um, I like it for that. Here, 15% off. So, boom, boom, boom. And if you're a student, you do get 35% off. So, copy and paste these links down in the chat so that you've got them. But I do like Code Academy for that kind of training as far as the technical side of things. And then as far as the concepts, there are a ton of YouTube videos out there, right? I've got a ton out there. There is, if you're on the more machine learning data analyst side of things, there is kind of the data janitor, right? Mike does a great job of really having some no nonsense videos out there. There is, obviously, if you could find somebody to be your mentor or your coach, a lot of those are paid. And a lot of them are paid because, for my perspective, when I first started doing mentoring and coaching, I was doing it for free, and I didn't get a lot of buy-in from the people that I was mentoring. It was kind of lackluster, and so I started charging a little bit. It's not a ton. Like right now, the basic subscription that I have is $100 a month. You have 2 one-on-one sessions, and I do some messaging support via Discord, but an email, but just enough so that you have some kind of skin in the game, right? And that helps. So that's why a lot of mentoring programs charge, not as much because anybody's getting rich off of it, but because it creates a little bit of skin in the game. It creates a little bit of momentum and kind of push the right motivation for you because you're paying for it. So it's so incredibly important to, if you could find a mentor, find a mentor, go use these tools that are out there. There used to be lynda.com, and I think it changed. I think another company bought it. But there's a ton out there. Again, I like Code Academy for it. There's Pluralsight. There's obviously LinkedIn Learning. And follow me on LinkedIn. I put a lot of stuff out on LinkedIn too, not just like my own posts about different things about data engineering, but I share a lot of other podcasts and resources that you could use to continue to learn as well. So those are some great opportunities and great tools. Yeah, Zephyr. Um, so so do those things. Those are the big things. Obviously, practice. One of the biggest things that you could do, in my personal opinion, is to find a. Sorry, my Alexa just rang. I don't know why. Um, One of the biggest things that you could do is to find a passion project, not to build your portfolio, right? Building your portfolio, uh, as a um, as a director, I never looked at anybody's portfolio. It wasn't something, especially for data engineers. I wanted to know, can do they have the skills? Can they practically apply them? Because portfolios are thrown together for a purpose, right? It, I didn't have time. Frankly, I didn't have time to look at somebody's portfolio. Um, but so boom, boom. Oh, there we go. Uh, but yeah, I mean, those are the big things that I'd focus on. Uh, Going back to the comments here, um, and I think again, um, I just saw a article saying that AWS is losing some of their market share, right? They've dropped below the 30% mark. Um, and that Microsoft is gaining market share. So that's a big thing, especially with this comment about Fabric, right? Um, you know, with Fabric continuing to gain momentum and Microsoft continuing to gain momentum, AWS is so great. I love AWS. Um, Again, Fabric kind of has a lower bar to entry, right? Microsoft tools generally have a lower bar to entry when it comes to new entry level data engineers or just anybody, right? Think about Microsoft Access, think about Microsoft Excel. Those kinds of tools have a really low bar to entry as far as your technical knowledge. And they could get more complex, but they have a really low bar to entry. Where AWS, the Azure side of things, I mean the Amazon side of things, have a tendency to be more technical. You need more networking skills. You need more of that those skills uh, to really jump into it and be able to use them. So really enjoyed today's session. Uh, Hopefully, you all got something out of it today. Uh, Let me know down in the comments if you are, watching this via recording, and let me know what you think, what you thought about the analogy, what you thought about your own maybe silent killers that I didn't address. Love to hear them. Love to know about them so that I could share them with the rest of the community. So everybody have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Hope you, for those of you that are in the States, and enjoy your long weekend. And I will talk to you again next week. Thank you.